excited to join you guys. Andy Caron, for those of you who don't know me, I'm the user group leader in Chicago for Marketo and current Marketo champion and part of the inaugural class of the Fearless 50. I've been in Marketo since 2012 because I'm apparently really old. And generally speaking, I tend to consider Marketo to be not just my happy place, but almost my happiest place. My first happiest place is with my kiddo and my husband. So that will always trump. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll jump into some stuff. We're going to jump around for a few things. So bear with me because we have to change some instances and things like that for all sorts of fun stuff. So we're going to look at 5 things today that I wish I'd learned in Marketo and then in parentheses earlier. So basically, these are things that I learned at some point, but I really wish I'd learned them sooner and maybe not the hard way in some cases. So on this, we're going to talk about behavior plus demo not equal person score. I see this a lot in different systems. I've had this in systems I've inherited. I've had this in systems I owned and didn't know better yet. But obviously, you know, when you're trying to use person score to be an amalgamation of your behavior and demographic scores, a lot of times things don't add up, literally. And so it can be really frustrating to have that not work the way that you want it to. So we're going to talk about this. So this is essentially using a webhook to do Excel math inside of Marketo. Let me share a different screen, and then we'll be good. All right. So we are going to look in here at admin. And I didn't build this in the Champ sandbox because we don't have access to webhooks in there. So we got to do it in here. So in webhooks, you can build a simple score update. There's a couple different tools out there that will provide this. In this particular case, this is the one that I'm using. So this is using just a simple login. When you edit this, you're going to see the basic setup here. So you want to make sure that in this particular setup, you're using post. And then it's a form URL and JSON the way that this is set up. And then all you need to do is put in the math. So equals token plus token. Just make sure that your token names actually match your token names inside the system. If you're using what you think is the token name and is not actually the token name, this will fail. So once you've done that particular part, and all of this is just new webhook, you come in here. Now, the funny thing is with webhooks, as soon as you update them, it jumps to the top of the one in the list. So you always have to jump back down before you give yourself a heart attack and think that it's set up wrong. And then you're just going to come in here and add a result and link that to, it's going to say lead score because that's the legacy API name for this back when it was a lead in Marketo and not a person. But you'll want to use lead score there for that. So this is basically saying, this is where I want the response for this process to go. So this is what happens at the other end of this equals on the equation. And then where you're going to go with this is just a simple monitoring smart campaign. I just made this an orphan for our purposes because it was quick and dirty, but usually I like to keep this inside of my scoring operational program just as a additional component. So for our purposes here, I've called this scoring justification. And I have this triggering off of score changes. So either behavior or demographic will kick this off. Now, technically, I know that this could potentially cause it to fire twice. So, you know, deal with that as it is. If it runs twice, it's just going to map it out the same anyway. So it's not really a huge issue other than if you have a lot of these running at once, you could have some data flow API issues, but for the most part, this isn't happening frequently enough to cause those. And then you're going to use your call webhook from your integrations here. Now, the one thing I will say is you do need to make sure that this is a trigger and not a filter, because you cannot use filters to call a webhook. It will fail. If you have to use a filtered list to call a webhook, what you can do is set up a cascading Smart campaign where you have your filtered list here with whatever your criteria are, and then you use your request a campaign component here, and then just do the campaign is requested trigger to set off your webhook. So there's a couple little workarounds around there, but really that's the most succinct way to go about doing this. So that's an option too if you want to run this, let's say on a nightly basis, you know, where it's if either changed, then run, and then it's only going to run once. So one thing to think about there, but a couple different ways to slice and dice it. All right, so let's go ahead, and I'm going to change my share back over to our deck. And we're going to run through program sync. So this is one of those things that I think you either learn by trial and error, or you just use it one way and you never realize that there's another way, or you don't really get into the weeds on the implications of this until you get further into the attribution game and those types of things. So, okay, so there are two types of syncs for campaign members inside of Marketo. Most people are most familiar with the program level sync. So this is where you go into the SFDC campaign sync component, and then you can either create new or sync over to an existing SFDC campaign. I always recommend creating new wherever possible if you're able to create your SFDC campaigns via the Marketo sync. It means that you're going to automatically have the program statuses there waiting for you when you go to activate it on the SFDC side, as opposed to having the standard sent responded statuses that are the default for the SFDC campaign setup. The other thing about this that's good to know is it does lower your API usage. So it's 200 people or up to 200 people, depending on when they're added per API call on this. So it's going to send them over in bulk. That also does mean that it's lower on the priority line. So this can have a tendency to fail, be blocked by SFDC, and also potentially have a significant delay. I've seen anywhere from 2 to like a 7-day delay on syncs, especially with larger API consumption integrations, where this just keeps getting deprioritized and deprioritized and deprioritized until it finally goes across and is added to the SFDC campaign, which can cause a lot of confusion and also some data issues down the line. So the other option is to use the campaign level sync. So this is actually, you'll notice here I'm specifically choosing change, not add. So change status in SFDC campaign. If the person's not already in the campaign, it's going to go ahead and add them as it changes the status. But you don't want to add someone to a campaign multiple times. You just want to go ahead and change their status so that they're updated there. That's the better streamline. So you can actually use the native program level sync to send the campaign into Salesforce and then break the sync and use this particular flow step to support campaign level syncing. It is a one-to-one API call, so each person that runs through is going to be pushed through as a unique call. But this can be triggered or scheduled based on program qualifications. So the thing that I love about this is, let's say you're running this huge event and you only want to actually pass into Salesforce people that you're going to care about for attribution purposes. So the people that actually register, attend, et cetera. You don't care about the invitees. So you can choose to not pass that status over by controlling it at a more status-based campaign level. So that's a nice component, and this does have a higher priority. So I have some clients that I work with that will use this type of a sync on things like demo requests and those types of things where they want it to just go really, really quickly. And then they'll rely on the program level sync for larger things that maybe are a little less prioritized or older. So you can choose, and you don't have to do the same across your entire program catalog. You can kind of go program by program, but you cannot use them together. So the way that this flow works is someone's going to be added to a Marketo program, and then you're going to sync them over to the SFDC campaign. And it's really important to make sure that you're tracking everything both locally in Marketo correctly at the program level, and that also that's being passed over into SFDC. So you want to make sure that your channel types on your SFDC campaign match what you have in Marketo. So this would be campaign type on the SFDC parlance side for Marketo channel or program channel. You want to make sure that your statuses are matching up across the two. So when you sync it over, you want to go in there and make sure that they've pulled over correctly. And that also what you have marked as successes is what you're seeing as responded on the SFDC side. Now, the key thing here is for attribution platforms that leverage this type of information to then create their timeline reporting on the order of events and sort of different velocity metrics, all that kind of stuff, they're going off the standard date, which is the date it was added to the SFDC campaign. Now, in days of yore, before everything was virtual, and maybe in the future again, when we go back to in-person events, if you're getting a list and you're uploading it 6, 7, 10 days post the event, the date on there is actually going to align with when the date of upload occurred. So when the person was added into your system. So something to be mindful of with the maintenance of your SFDC campaigns, if you're currently using attribution or planning on using it in the future, is you're going to have to go in and modify that engagement date so that it matches when the event actually occurred. Because you don't want to have an event that actually drove a lot of new leads or revenue that isn't getting the credit because it was uploaded 10 days after and half the people have already come on your website and filled out a demo form as a result of visiting the booth, but it just looks like they appeared out of nowhere and filled out the demo form, and then we're at an event, right? So that's the order of operations here really, really matters. And then typically most of that attribution data you're gonna have to pull into a visualization tool. So this is kind of that flow of data to think about with the campaign processes. All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing really fast. I'm gonna jump into a different Marketo sandbox, and then we'll go ahead and run through the last 3 here. And I didn't say this at the beginning, but I tend to be more of an interactive talker whenever possible. So when I'm speaking and we're running through stuff, if there's questions that come up or you want to ask me about something while we're in the middle of it, please go ahead and just throw out that question either in chat or raise your hand and tell me what you're thinking. And I'll address it then. I know a lot of times I feel like when I have questions during a presentation, if I wait till the end, when I finally get into it, to the question period, I don't quite remember what it really was about that I wanted to ask about. So what the context of that was. All right. Let's go ahead and jump back over here for just a second. So we're going to go ahead and jump into pivoting program level reports with Smartlist columns. This is actually something I learned within the last 6 months, something I wish I had learned a long time ago and feel like I really should have learned, but you know, we literally live and learn, right? So, all right, so let's jump back into our Marketo instance, and we're going to be in here for the rest of this, so this should be pretty easy. All right. And I just got all the speakers popping up in front of my stuff, so I'm going to move you guys. Okay. So within certain types of reports that exist within the marketing activities component of Marketo, you have the capability to actually parse out the data further. And if you go into setup on any of these particular reports, anytime in the side column you see this custom columns component, this is going to allow you to add additional data. So I've built out 2 use cases for this just to run through really quickly. I will say when we look at this, this is a sandbox. So the numbers here are really low. That's not necessarily going to show a plethora of really interesting, exciting data, but it is going to allow us to have a general understanding of how we can look at the data and think about it. So the first example that I'm going to give you here is dragging over custom columns. So these are Smartlists, but these are specifically Smartlists that live in your database tab. So this can't be a Smartlist that you have in the same program that you're pivoting on. It does have to be database Smartlist assets. But other than that, anything you can dream up here, the world is your oyster. So I'm just going to put in filled out form. So each of these smart lists is looking for a form fill out and then a number of times. So up to 5 times is what I've got here. And then we go ahead and apply this. Now, there's probably not a lot of form fills happening in the sandbox. I bet this is dummy data that's been uploaded, but you'll get the general idea here. So from here, we're actually able to see, based on our subsets, how many forms have been filled out by the people that are in the database based on when they were created here. So this is kind of the quick down and dirty way to understand how many form fills you've had total based on leads. And then you can, in your smart list, narrow this down to a specific set of forms or just like a demo form, for example. You can parse this out to a particular tactic that you're working on, a whole variety of things. So there's a lot of ways to then narrow this data down again. And then we can go in here and also think about this from a perspective of quick and easy reports. I know I have it in here. Just a second, let's check and see what I did with myself. So, there it is. Okay, so we've added in life cycle stages in here. I'm going to delete this one and put the MQL next. So it is search based on the first. I'm only going to put these 2 in just so you can get the general gist of this. But this means that we can look at people created by a specific program, tactic, effort, and then actually see where they currently are in their life cycle based on these criteria. So kind of a cool thing. The next thing we're going to jump in and look at, and this is something that I learned a number of years ago, but I think I had at least one really crazy process that I went through of trying to locate URLs before I discovered this. So what we're looking at now are landing pages, view in Design Studio, mass approval, and also search by URL. So a lot of people don't know that you can actually see all of your landing pages by clicking on the top level for this. Same is true with forms, email templates, all that kind of good stuff. So all of these you can access in sum total, all the landing pages that you have, and get a lot of good data here. The other thing about this, though, is that there is an additional column. It's not part of the default native view, but it actually shows, if you pull it in here, your page URL. So if you've ever had someone come to you and be like, can you tell me where this page is in Marketo, and all they give you is the URL of the page, you just need to come in here and search for it, and guess what? You got your asset right away, quick and easy. The other thing that is possible here is around being able to mass approve. So when you are working on a landing page template, you make updates. When you approve those updates, it's going to kick anything that's living off of it. So let's say this particular landing page template, we edited this. It would kick everything into a draft stage. And at that point, we need to approve it in order to get those changes to roll live. So instead of going through and approving each page individually, which I will tell you probably about 2013 I did once because I didn't know this existed, you can actually just come in here and mass approve. You can also unapprove pages. I really wouldn't recommend deleting something if it's been live, but that technically is in here. And you have a lot of other functionalities in here as well. So these are not currently in draft. It's not showing that option, but if we come here, you'll see we can mass approve these. So you can select as many as you like. You can select all of them. And then these are sortable as well. So if you want to sort by, let's say, a particular template, et cetera, you can do that. So huge time saver, big fan of that. So the last thing we're going to look at is trigger tokens. So I've just pulled together a really quick use case on this around most recent program. So what this is doing is it's basically looking, these work with triggers, hence the trigger.token name here, with any trigger that you have in the system. In this case, I'm using the program status is changed trigger. And I want to pull in programs that are the most recent programs the person has belonged to. So I can pick any program, and then I'm actually selecting not to do this for certain statuses. So any of my testing, any of my operational, and then all of my not in programs. If I'm removing someone from the program, I don't necessarily want to put that program as their most recent Marketo program, because guess what? It's not, they're not a member anymore. So these are my exclusions. It's a lot easier to pull things out that way then. And you can't do contains in here, just so you, as a reminder, so it really has to be specific. So if you're updating your channels, adding new things, this does need to be maintained a little bit going forward, but it's really going to give you some options. So in here, we're going to put most recent Marketo program, which is a field that I created just inside of Marketo for this process. So usually I like to have this in SFCC rolling down. And then trigger.name. What this is going to yield for us is the actual name of the Marketo program that caused that status change. Now from here, I can do a couple of things. I've created a single one, but usually I have like 10 to 12, depending on the number of success statuses I have in here, where I'm pulling in a temp status. I'm using that program status is changed again. And then in this case, I'm looking specifically for statuses that include engaged. I should probably pull that testing out of there. I didn't grab that. And then I'm using a temp most recent Marketo program status, which is a very long name for a field, sorry, not sorry, and putting in the value of engaged. I want to be very explicit about what these fields are, so that's why I've gone ahead and just used a crazy long name there. And then in addition to providing a field that shows my most recent Marketo program, I can also show my most recent program success. So this is looking for the program status is changed and success is true. And then I didn't throw any wait steps in advance of this because I want to give this a little bit of time to update. So I'll probably put, I don't know, let's say 15 seconds because it feels about right now. So we're going to write into, this should be success. Hold on, let me grab this before I do that, because otherwise I'm going to be mad at myself. And now I can have it concatenated with that same trigger name that's pulling in, as well as my temp most recent program status. So this will actually give me the program name and the status that pass this forward. So this is a good sort of rudimentary set of data points. I also like to use this as a redundancy to capture missing acquisition program names. So I can set up an alert that basically says, hey, most recent program, Marketo program changed, but their acquisition program name is still empty. And so it was missed in that program. So it allows me to go in and fix the program and then also potentially update or backdate any data, since the acquisition program does have to be set at the program level. Fortunately, I can't set it globally here, but at least that gives me an option to do some data checking and circle back on it. So those are the 5 things I wish I had learned in Marketo sooner. And I will kick it back over to you guys.